A very good morning to you on this 22nd day of September. We are live on the Fifth Connection. And if you've joined us, this is the channel where we talk through the storyline of the scriptures, since the scriptures has been given to us in the container of a story. It's about storyline sense making, and that's what we are about this morning. We are in chapter 4 of the story, where we are looking at the assembly prompts. What are the prompts for the believing community that they need to engage in? These are pre-transformation prompts, and they are there for our edification, because the body is given to what I call cruciform bodybuilding. The bodybuilding that the assembly engages in is cross-shaped. It is cruciform. The cross and the empty tomb in salvation, and the cross and the empty tomb in sanctification. God makes all of life salvageable through the death and resurrection of Christ. And every area of our lives as followers of the way becomes salvageable through death and resurrection, because the gospel is a pattern of dying and rising, dying to egoic attachments and living in continuity, living in adherence to who God is and what Christ has done through his salvific work. And so in chapter 4, verse number 1 to 32, the writer is going to talk about real values, while in the next chapter he's going to talk about chapter 5, sacrificial ventures. He's talking about real values in 1 to 32 of the story in chapter 4. What does cruciform transformation look like? And he's going to move through 3 broad phases. Those phases are huge. But cruciform transformation in the first 12 verses has to do with a broadcast etiology. In other words, the fivefold ministry, the gifted men that God has given to the assembly, function in what we call a broadcast kind of model, where they are nurturing the immature, where they are nurturing spiritual babies and moving them on and pushing them and nudging them towards maturity. And so in the first 12 verses, Paul talks about a tall-ordered hierarchy that is rank-based. It is rank-based authority. Apostles, prophets, pastors, and teachers, they function in a broadcast model where they are giving off the deposit of policies for action, the ways to conduct your life, what living in the real world looks like. That's a broadcast etiology. That's where it starts. It's the beginning. What we have done is we have made the beginning the be-all and end-all, because the end game is all to maturity. All, not some. As many to leadership as is possible. But it's all to maturity. Some are born, many, if not all, are born into the family of God, immature, as babies. But sad to say, not many end up mature. Being able to see reality for what it is, being able to move in the flow of reality. And then from verse 13 to verse 16, the writer talks about a flat, disordered ecology. He moves from a tall, ordered hierarchy to a flat, disordered ecology. Because you see, relationships rather are messy. That's the nature of relationships. That's why so many people don't like relating, because it gets the goo and the glue on their hands. The glue that keeps relationships together is too gooey for them. So they would sit soak and sour and hide in a corner. A flat disordered ecology is about relating in a mesh network topology. We will explain these terms as we go through the biblical text. And in this phase, relationships are based on mutuality and reciprocity. Relationships are a two-way street. It's not one-way traffic. But we move from a tall, ordered hierarchy to a flat, disordered ecology, where all are making their contribution in the context of the assembly. When the people of God gather, that's the assembly. And then in verse 17 to verse 32, there is a renewed vitality from a broadcast etiology to a mesh network topology to a renewed vitality. Have you ever wondered why some assemblies are ready to go 6 feet under? Like one guy said, whoa, when I go to that church, they are deep. Whoa, that's a deep fellowship. That's a deep assembly. To which someone else responded, yeah, they are 6 feet under. And that's the impression you get when you get into some groups. Well, the renewed vitality has to do with a live, reordered morphology, because people are transforming. Because that is what life is all about. Differentially transforming. All of us are moving toward the one goal. It's called Christ-likeness. I become a better self than I was yesterday because my goal is morphing into the image of Christ, to become an imager of God. Not images of God, an imager of God. I represent God on the earth, and Jesus makes all of that possible. And so that's a broad overview of the 32 verses, and it is chock full of storyline prompts, storyline goads that motivate us to move along, get with the program, move to the next step. And so we saw in verse number 1, Paul has a limitation on him, but he has learned to integrate his shadow. He integrates his limitations as part of the lever. As my colleagues would say, the lever. We're very British. We say lever. We leverage things. We are leveraging our limitations in the cause of the gospel. And so Paul says, I am using my limitation. How am I using it? To strengthen my bargaining chip in the present. What's my bargaining chip? Walking worthy, walking in a manner worthy of the calling. That's what moving in the flow of reality is all about. Walking, living in the context of the real world. Walk in a manner worthy. There's the word axiom. Axios means worth or value. And axiology, or the study of axioms, has to do with studying values. What things have worth? All of us have a values, a hierarchy that when we attend to certain things, our values hierarchy is arranged and rearranged because now we're focusing our attention on something specific. So what had high value for me yesterday, today is no longer that same value. It shifts further down the pike, further down the totem pole. and something else captivates my attention because I am focusing. Now in verse 2, what are the three practical, or as I would call it, the empirical evidences that are to show that I am walking in a manner worthy of the calling to which I have been called? Incidentally, the pronoun here is the second person plural. You plural have been called. And you plural have to engage and imbibe or embrace these three postures. And what are they? Verse 2, humility, gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another. Humility and gentleness exercised in the sphere of patience, bearing with one another. Those are the three postures, the three poses or capacities that we need to have in order to face reality, because you posture to face reality, because reality comes at you like a runaway train. Your home responsibility, your marital responsibility, your fiscal responsibility, your work responsibility, your physical health responsibility. All these things are constantly coming at you. And how are you going at it? How are you posturing for it? Well, you posture it with reserve. Watch my 3 R's now. Reserve, repose, and restraint. That's how you posture for walking worthy. Reserve, repose, and restraint. Because humility has to do with an attitude. A posture that says, I am here to learn. Because if you want to be a lifelong learner, you must be open to learn. And open-minded to learn, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. But you are willing to learn. And one who is ideologically possessed doesn't have space for learning. They only learn what is comfortable for them, that affirms their confirmation bias, because they live their life in an echo chamber. What's an echo chamber? It's your subjection of yourself. All of who you are and what you do is subjected to information and confirmation that affirms what you believe. And so your posture is not to hold things with an open hand, but to be very close-minded. And an open-minded person is one who truly can experience what it means to live free. Because that's what the book of Galatians is all about. How that grace and not law is the basis for living free. All 6 chapters of Galatians drives home the point. It's grace and not law living, not 613 laws or 10 commandments or 5 techniques or 12 rules for living. It's all about a posture of life, a reserve, a repose, a gentleness. Oh, that is something wonderful to have. A gentle touch versus an abrasive touch. None of us enjoy people who are abrasive unless we ourselves are of the abrasive variety. It says, I am patient. I am long-tempered when it comes to people. Our fuses are far too short and we constantly trim our fuses because we are impatient. Bearing with one another. Yes, putting up with one another in personal voluntary sacrifice, because that's what bearing with one another in love is all about. Putting up with one another in personal voluntary sacrifice of my drivenness. Some of us think God is going to slap into a panic because we are not where we are supposed to be. and he's wringing our hands in consternation over us. The last time I checked, God is bouncing up and down with excitement over me because I posture myself to do what he says do. John 7:17. If any man wills to do his will, he will know what the doctrines are, what the teachings are, whether they are from God or whether John says, I'm speaking on my own authority. John 3:21 says, but whoever does what is true comes to the light. There's something about active doing of what God says do that gets you to embark on a journey of discovery. It's not all a bunch of hot air. Some of us talk the walk, and so few are walking the talk. Let your walk talk louder than your talk talks. What you are speaks so loud, a chorus says, that the world can't hear what you're saying. They're watching how you walk, not listening to your talk. They're judging by your actions every day. Is your walk talking louder than your talk talks? Well, here are three postures: humility, gentleness, and gentleness with patience, bearing with one another. Who are you to be in bearing mode with today? Who are you going to be putting up with today in personal voluntary sacrifice? Your partner, the wife of your youth, your kids, fellow believers, those who are differentially transformed within the same assembly as you are. It's called church. What's your posture toward them today? Or are you sick and tired of their just being around? Well, today you're going to have opportunities to exercise your spiritual muscles in these poses: reserve, repose, and restraint. Because that is what is going to posture you for the next big ask in verse number 3, which is about the unity in the assembly. How does unity come about among the people of God? But before you get there, you need to be postured well with reserve, repose, and restraint in order to be able to move ahead and endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I trust that as you go into this day, you will be on the lookout for opportunities to exercise reserve, repose, and restraint. I trust you will enjoy the Lord as you go with God. Goodbye for now.